Leonardo da Vinci by Elizabeth Lundberg. In order to better understand Leonardo da Vinci, we must take a look at the movement he was part of. Da Vinci's art was created with the influence of the High Renaissance movement. Artists became centered around humanism, which saw man as more important than God. Religious scenes were painted, but focused more on man than God. Greek philosophy also provided the ideal human body type that was in the image of the Greek gods. The sculptures and panel displayed here are perfect examples of the use of Greek mythology in art. The panel in the middle has two well-known figures, Venus and Cupid. Crunches representing the godlike figures as humans rather than depicting them as all-powerful. The left sculpture depicts the wife of Orpheus, who was bitten by a snake, as told in Greek mythology. The sculpture on the right is called Satyr, which means half man, half goat, and is very prevalent in Greek mythology as well. Linear perspective and vanishing points also allowed artists to paint more realistic paintings than ever, which will later be seen in Da Vinci's works. Although artists could achieve realism, they focused on beauty and harmony instead. Da Vinci was in the epicenter of the High Renaissance movement. It began in 1490 and ended in 1527. The movement was also predominantly paid for by the popes during this time period in Rome. The early Renaissance was based out of Florence and was paid for by the Medici family, a very rich and powerful family of the time. However, the High Renaissance transitioned to Rome due to Pope Leo X, pictured to the left. This is the son of Lorenzo de' Medici as well. Art had reached its greatest height during the High Renaissance period. Works were more realistic than ever and chased perfection. It was centered more around beauty and humanism, as stated in the previous slide. The Renaissance was an explosion of all new types of works. Oil-based paints allowed more dimension than during the 15th century with flat colors. Paintings also became more focused on achieving a harmonious image by making sure all the parts were cohesive. These ideals became integrated in architecture and sculptures as well. Pictured to the right is the Templetto from 1502, located in Rome in St. Peter's Basilica. All the parts work as a cohesive whole and reference ancient architecture. Da Vinci became known as a true Renaissance man. This was due to his many skill sets, which also became common for this time. An artist was usually a painter, sculptor, and architect. However, Da Vinci did not only do those, but also was an inventor, engineer, and draftsman. There are many drafts of inventions that Da Vinci was working on throughout his lifetime. One is pictured here. This is a sketch of Da Vinci's ideas for a flying machine. He was well versed in science, which motivated many of his inventions. Da Vinci was born in 1452, and at the age of 15, he became the apprentice of Andrea del Verrocchio, one of the most well-known artists of this time. This is where Da Vinci acquires most of his skills that make him so well known. He also worked with Verrocchio on a number of paintings while in Florence, which was the center of intelligence. In 1482, Da Vinci moves from Florence to Milan, where he creates The Last Supper, and works with the idea of a flying machine. After the death of Verrocchio in 1488, Da Vinci begins studying anatomy. He then moves back to Florence, where the Mona Lisa is sketched. He then moves to Rome in 1513, and then moves soon after to France and dies there in 1519. This is the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa is one of the most well-known works in the world. This was created by Da Vinci sometime between 1503 and 1519. It was originally sketched while he was living in Florence and converted to an oil painting on a wooden panel later on. This is currently in Paris, hanging in the Museum du Louvre. No one knows the identity of the woman pictured, which causes more fascination with the piece. Historians believe she could have been Lisa Gherardini, a merchant's wife. The piece is on 600 by 470 millimeters, which is rather small. This is one of the most valuable works of art in the world. This is painted using the technique of sfumato in a landscape, pictured closer on the right-hand side, which means to paint without lines with sort of a blurring manner, such as smoke. As with the ideals of the time, this piece exemplifies humanism. She is the center of the piece and is very realistic in representation of a woman during this time period. Pictured here is the Last Supper. The Last Supper is formed in 1492 and finished between 1494 to 1498. This is painted on the wall of the refectory of Santa Maria dei Grazi in Milan, where it will stay permanently. The dimensions are 15 by 29 feet. The paint started to flake off the wall even while Da Vinci was alive, due to him not using layers of paint. This painting is also not a fresco, which means he did not paint on wet plaster, such as most of the artists of this time. Da Vinci believed that this made the painter rush to finish a work before the plaster dried. This is also why the paint began to peel from the wall. Although Da Vinci created his own painting technique by using tempera paint on dried plaster, this is made of pigment, egg yolk, and water, which usually leaves a chalky appearance. This was also used during the medieval times. This painting uses the idea of a vanishing point and uses line perspective. He hammered a nail into the wall and tied it to a string. He would then use it to mark his guidelines to ensure all views led back to the vanishing point. If you look at the window archways, you can see they all lead back to the point just above Jesus' head above the window. This is also classic humanism by representing a biblical scene as just regular people of the time. This is Jesus' last meal before he is betrayed by Judas and then crucified. He is surrounded by his disciples. This is one of the most well-known pieces in the world. Horse and Rider. This was created in 1508 and is one of the only three-dimensional pieces Da Vinci made. This was created by Charles de Amboise, a French governor. This may have been the smaller figure of an intended much larger sculpture of the governor. This is a beeswax sculpture and is only 25 centimeters tall, but the full size would have been made of bronze. After Da Vinci died, he gave the model to his apprentice to finish the full-size version. This was lost during World War I and was kept in a vault. It was uncovered when two businessmen were interested in purchasing it. With the Renaissance, the horse stands for beyond natural frontiers. The horse goes beyond war and destruction, but is rather a symbol of friendship among nations. This is currently displayed in Jägermeister as an exhibition located in Budapest. Da Vinci was very influential, not only during his time period, but even now. During this time period, he was one of the first artists to work on a cotton wood paneling. This is how the Mona Lisa has been able to stay intact so long. As mentioned earlier, he also invented the technique called sfumato, which was used in the Mona Lisa. This is done by softening the colors with a dark glaze to blur the edges of an object like a smoky haze. This word comes from the Italian word fumo, which means to smoke. Da Vinci also came up with the technique chiaroscuro. This was the use of light and shadows to create a two-dimensional object. He gave life to paintings that were flat before. He was also one of the only artists of the time that was able to effectively use a vanishing point. Da Vinci was also influential in modern technologies. In one of his notebooks, he sketched the first idea of a parachute as displayed on the left. He also thought of the original helicopter, which is pictured in the center, although a working model was never created. He also was in the workings of a scuba suit, as pictured to the right. These are only a few of the contributions he gave to the modern society. Da Vinci is still one of the most influential people to ever live. And here's the works cited, and works cited continued.